And there we go. Hello again. Welcome back to Let's Code Games. The Twitch stream where we recreate Zelda 3 in Unity using C#. And yeah, let's see where we're at and what we want to do today. Actually, last time we hit a really cool milestone, if you remember, which is we were able to get the sword and start attacking with the sword. And we have some bushes down here that we can attack. And as I said in the live stream, I polished the particles a little bit, and also I added the animations for slashing left and right and upwards, but you can still see that when we slash upwards that the sword is ahead of the character. So that's something that we can focus on today. I also want to focus on an item database, because last time we hard-coded a bunch of stuff that I really want to have a generic version of, so that we can spawn items and attach items to the character's hands and stuff like that. And I also really would like to get to the point where a short animation is playing when we get a new item, so that the player gets a better feedback that an item was picked up, stuff like that. Because we have cool animations for that. So yeah, I think those are good points that we can tackle today. I mean, usually it takes a little while till people arrive, so I thought maybe in the beginning I always can do a little level design, and so we can grow our world steadily, step by step. And just a couple of minutes, I have a couple new items from Jesse that I want to add that don't show us all that any new stuff, because they're basically just obstacles like the other items as well, but they just add to the environment. And I think I already put them in the sprites folder, environment. Yes, so we have fence here, and let's make sure that the fence has the right size. So we have a fence pole, and we also have two different fence poles that have a locked or a wooden board to the side, so that we can make a nice fence. And we got some flowers, but some flowers and some grass, and this is basically just very simple decoration that just sits there, and you cannot interact with it at all. It's just makes the world a little prettier. And if you remember from Zelda 3, the world actually let's open this up. I have a screenshot of this, and so let's go games and Zelda, and then the overworld here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So the world always has these little flowers and grass stuff around here to just make it look a little fuller and a little more lively. And I actually also have slight animations for that, and I want to so the animations basically are the flower is dancing a little bit, and the grass is either waving in the wind or being pushed down. And I like the push down part, so we can later on create a script that the grass is being pushed down when the character walks over it, which doesn't add anything to the gameplay, but it just makes it a little nicer. But I don't think that I will be doing that on stream, because it's not teaching us too much. So just look forward to that later on when we have some grass on there. It gets some interactivity, but for now we just put the grass and the flowers here without any animations and stuff. So let's quickly create the prefabs for that. I just duplicate the flower and parent it to itself. I always do that and then remove the sprite renderer in the parent. And this way, basically, I have the visual objects in the center already because I duplicated it, and it's on the same position. So it's just a quick way to create a visuals object. So we have the flower 1 here, we have a second flower, duplicate this, visuals, flower 2, and some grass as well. So and I think from next week on, stuff like that, I'm just going to start the stream a little bit earlier than usual and basically have this level design stuff as some sort of pre-show or something like that. I saw that at other streams, and I think this is a good idea because then people have some time to get in and see that the stream will start shortly, and then when we actually get to the coding part, the people people who are interested in the coding part will be able to are there, and I think it's better that way. So let's create prefabs for this. We have an environment folder, so grass 2, grass 1, flower 2, and flower 1, and those are basically just they're half the size. If you draw a grid over all the objects, the grass and the flowers are roughly half the size of the other objects. So I guess we can put them, let's see, if we put them in the center, so we have to offset them by a quarter, so they are on the same grid as the other objects. And so I have these. I will add more of these later, maybe in the pre-show for next week. I just wanted to add these objects so they're in here, so they're in the GitHub as well later on. And yeah, if you want to create a level with that, then you have some more variation stuff in here. So the grass, and then we have the fence here. Let's make a prefab out of that as well. Visuals. Did I remove all the... No, I did not. I did not remove the sprite renderers in the parents. I don't need 2 sprite renderers. So fence, sprite renderer, and the parent removed. We have this kind of fence, which is basically just a log, and then we also have the other ones like this and like this. So visuals. Okay, so while I do that, we can talk a little bit about how we want to achieve the stuff that we want to do today. So first of all, I want to have the feedback for the player, the animation playing once an item is picked up. But in order to do that, we can continue to hardcode all the items that we have, as we did with the sword. Basically, once we interact with the sword, a trigger is played. The player gets the sword item type, and then we equip the sword to the equip the sword so that the player can attack with the sword. And we do that by hand. Basically, we check if item added to inventory is sword, then equip sword. And the same would be done if we start adding the animations, the pickup animations for the items. So because the sword has a different kind of animation frame, basically the character just holds the sword up with one hand, and the other items that the character can get, the big items like new weapons, we have a shield for example, they are held up with 2 hands, and we can hardcode all that. But if more and more items get added, this is going to get very cumbersome to maintain and hardcode all of that. So I basically want to create an item database where each item is basically just a it's an array of all the items that we have. And then each item can have different flags and different tags and stuff. For example, we can set up which pickup animation is being played once the character gets the item for the first time. We can say if the item gets equipped into the weapon hand, if the item gets equipped to the shield hand, and stuff like that. So we can have little booleans for all of that, for all the items. So whenever we add a new item, we can basically just go into the database and set up all this data. And then we can also set up the prefab for the item, so we don't have to load that manually. We can just look up the prefab in the item database and stuff like that. So and making databases in Unity is really simple, actually. There's a cool concept called the Scriptable Object that helps us do that very easily. And yeah, I'm going to show you that in a second. So let's create the prefabs for the fence here, and then I just create a simple, nice looking fence. And the fence needs some colliders. The flowers, we just walk over them, but the fence actually has to block the character. So let's add a box collider to D here, and then adjust it a little bit and a little bit in the height. This looks good. Apply this to the prefab. So the second fence gets a collider too, and it's offset a little bit here to the side. And then I don't like it being offset, actually. Let's offset the visuals object here in order to make it easier for us to align them later on, because if I put them on the same position, I want the logs to be on the same position. So let's try this out. Let's put this on the same position as the other one, so -1 0, and then we put the visuals object. We offset the visuals object so that they align, and this way it will be way easier to align them later on. And now we can edit this collider here. Oops. Make this a little to the left, and then make this a little smaller as well. I think this is good. And apply this to the prefab, and we do the same for the third fence here. So -1 0. Let's see that the visuals, the log is actually aligning with the other ones. Perfect. And then we add a collider for this one as well. Was this the right one? Yes. So box collider to D. Make this a little smaller here, and what did I do? This and like this and like this. Perfect. So now we can create a small fence here. I won't position too many of them now. This is just yeah. This is just so we have some new items in here, and you can get those because they were done. Jesse finished them early, so I just wanted to add them to the code here, to the project. So let's put a small fence here. That's enough. And now you can see. Well, we have to work. Yeah, we do the sorting order in a second. But you can see, since we aligned the objects so that the logs actually align, we can now snap the objects to a grid, and it would work. The fence would basically line up. So let's put this in our environment. Let's create new objects for that. Fence. Put this here. Let's 0, 0, 0, and then we put all the fence objects into this parent here. Okay. And now we have to figure out the sorting order. So the ones at the bottom have to be on a higher sorting order. Let's put this to 5. And then this is good. Should be even higher than this one. So let's put this to 10. And this is cumbersome to do by hand for now, but we can figure out the system to do that for us later. So let's see, and this object, let's just make sure that this is always above the one behind. So we put this on 1. Okay, so now we have this little fence here, and we can of course make this larger. But yeah, I'll do that next week before the show. But we have the fence objects and the grass objects now. All right. So now that those are in here, let's start with the code. So the item database. And Unity has a concept called a scriptable object. And a scriptable object is very similar to a component, except that you can create the scriptable objects in the project view, and it doesn't have to be attached to a game object. It can be an asset by itself, basically. So once you created the scriptable object, you are once you created the scriptable object, it lives in the project view, and you can access it in references just like any other asset, like a sprite or something. Hi, are you using another library not included in the Git repository? I don't think so. Is there an error when you get it from the repository? Maybe I forgot to include add some script or something. I'm not sure. But I'm not using any library or any external stuff. This is all vanilla Unity stuff here. So maybe I just forgot to add a script if there's an error. And yeah, just let me know. I will check it later after the stream and then make sure that it actually works if there's a problem. Okay, so let's create a scriptable object first. So we create a new folder here. Databases. The error is character interaction model type box collider 2 does not contain definition for offset. Yes, I remember that we had offset in there and then changed it. Oh, that might be it. Yeah, it might be. I'm using Unity 5, so that might be that they've renamed it, because it told me. Yes, there was an error. I used the variable center, and then basically center is deprecated, I think. Let's go to that script and see. Character interaction model, line 41. Okay, and if I use box collider punct, yeah, that was the issue. So box collider.center is the value in Unity 4.6, and it says here that this value is deprecated, so they changed it. So in Unity 5, it's box collider.offset now. But no worries. I mean, just Unity 5 is free, so just get that. It's easier than maintaining backwards compatibility. All right. So I created the folder, and we want to create our item database now. So the item database, or any database, any scriptable objects, is created just like any other script. Like right-click, create C# script. We call it item database. And the difference to a regular script is that it does not inherit from money behavior, like the script would do so by default. But it inherits from Scriptable Object. And we can basically do the same thing we can do in money behaviors here. We can add values here that like in fields, public fields, stuff like that would get shown in the inspector. And every public variable will be serialized by Unity. So this is a very good way to get a data storage, something like that. So we can simply just say public item type my item, and then my item. And once we create a scriptable object from this, we can store this data. But since we're going to do a database, we actually want to have a list of objects. So what I'm going to, the way that I always do it is I use system collection generic. I basically just use a list, and then basically just call it data. But I don't want to have a list of item types because then we couldn't attach any data to it. I want to have a data type that I created myself. And this is very simple to do. It's basically just a class that you create. So let's call it item data. And each item data has an item type. And it has, let's just start very simple. It has a game object, a prefab that belongs to that item type. And it has, well, let's just do that for now. And then we add more fields later than we need. So, but before we can see, before this works, we actually have to tell, we have to say that the item data can be serialized. So we just say this is system, we add this attribute system serializable. And this way, this is actually a C# attribute, but this way Unity knows that this class can be serialized. So if it's in a scriptable object, whenever you change any data in there and then hit save in Unity, the data gets saved as well. In order for this to work, all the public fields inside this class have to be serializable as well. And serializable types are basically all the base types that Unity provides for you or that are in C#. So you have int, float, string, all that is serializable. A game object is serializable. An item type in our case is serializable because it's just an enum. So all enums are serializable. And vectors, quaternions, all the default variable types can be serialized basically. And I'm not sure if we can actually see. No, we can't. Maybe the object. No. Okay, so we can't see the serializable attribute for Unity, but yeah. But we basically have to add a serializable object attribute to our own data type so that Unity knows this is serializable. And then we can nest different types as well. So we can create a new serializable item data 2, and then put this into item something here, for example. So you can have nested objects, but you have to make sure that so this is serializable because it has the attribute serializable, and then all of this is serializable, so it will be stored in it can be saved by the database basically. But yeah, so you can nest your own classes. Just make sure that all the custom data types that you create are marked with system serializable, and then all the data types that are in there are actually serializable. Okay, so we have this is basically the base structure for our database. It's a list of objects that can have the item that have an item type and that have a game object attached to them. Now we have to create this scriptable object, and this is a little tricky actually in Unity because we have to create this via an editor script, and I'm still not sure why there is no easier way to do this, but there are some scripts in the asset store that help you create scriptable objects, but I'm always surprised why Unity doesn't have that by default inside there, because it's a hassle to create a scriptable object. But I just show you how. So an editor script is a script that will not be run by your game code once you build the game, but that will be run inside the editor. And all of those scripts have to be in a special folder named editor. Once you have this folder, Unity knows all the scripts in there will be executed here at editor time, and they also have some additional functionality they can access that only exists at editor, at edit time, stuff like that. So we create the editor folder. It has to be this exact name. It doesn't matter where it is in your project, but it has to be this exact name. And then we create item database creator script, which we only need once, so it's a waste, but yeah, anyway. So let's go to the item database creator script, and now that we added the editor folder and there's a script in there, you can actually see that Unity, the solution, Unity now creates two different projects. You have your regular assembly, and then you have your editor assembly. And this is because Unity compiles all the editor data into a different DLL, and then it doesn't ship that DLL with your game. I'm not sure if it's a DLL. Basically, just yeah. The editor scripts are grouped into one project, and the runtime scripts are grouped into another project. Okay, let's find the script here, item database creator. And the cool part about editor scripts is that you can add using Unity editor to the top here, and you can access a bunch of new functionality that you can't access through the Unity engine assembly. For example, so we want to create an editor script, and let's start there. So we create I think it's public, I don't know, doesn't care. We create a static method called create item database, and we want to run this function inside the editor. So we can simply, because we added the Unity editor runtime up here, we can simply add an attribute to the static method called menu item. And then we call this, we make a folder, let's code games / databases / create item database. And what this does, let's put a debug value here first, and then we put the code later. I just want to show you what this menu item does. So let's go over to the editor again. And the menu item actually, once it compiles and we refresh up here, you can see a new menu item is added here called Let's Code Games. And because we added all these slashes here, those are basically the path of the menu item. So you go Let's Code Games / databases / create item database. And once we hit that, our console says hi. So basically, once we hit that, this method is being executed. And this is one of the ways that editor scripts add new functionality. So you can add functionality to the Unity editor. And editor scripts are very powerful, and I'm sure that we will create some really great editor scripts for this project at some point. For example, we can create a terrain engine for us, so it has a tile-based terrain, stuff like that. You can basically recreate anything inside the Unity editor. You can create a completely new level editor, but this is for now we basically just want to create a new item database scriptable object here. So let's do that, and there are 3 steps we have to do. So first of all, we create an object, new database, and we create this through ScriptableObject create instance. This is basically just similar to GameObject instantiate. This is how you create an instance of a scriptable object. Pass on the item database, pass on the database, pass on the type. So now we have the new item database in this variable here. And now we want to actually create an asset from it inside the project folder. So we do this with the asset database, and this is also something in the Unity editor assembly, so you can only access this asset database from the editor and not at runtime. And we call create asset, and then it asks us for the object, the assets we want to create. So this is our database that we just created, and then it asks us for the path where we want to create it. So I just for now I just created at the root path, so asset / we call it item database, and then I always just put .asset in here, so I know this is a scriptable object. And after this, we have to refresh the asset database so it knows a new object was created, and it will show up. So let's see if I did everything right here. I usually just look those lines up. So we go to Let's Go Games, Databases, Create Item Database, and if everything worked, we go to Assets, and there you go. You see, we have a new asset here called Item Database. And actually, let's move this to. So I want to access the item database from wherever in the project, right? And any object might access the item database and look stuff up or create an object. So I put this item database into another special folder called the resources folder. And the resources folder is special because you can access any asset that is in the resources folder is loaded with every level, and you can access it or create it via scripts and stuff like that. You will not be able to create a game object just via script that's in the prefab folder if you don't have a reference to it, but you can get a reference to objects that are in the resources folder with the resource method. I show it to you in a second. But so let's move this over here, resources, and then let's create a subfolder here, databases, because I'm sure we're going to create more databases later on. So move the item database here, and now just recap what we just did. We created we created a scriptable object called item database. The item database has a list of item data, and an item data is basically just a pair of an item type and a game object. And we can add more fields here later on, but for now it's just an item type and a game object. And then we created an editor script that creates an asset, and this asset basically is in the project folder. And you can access this asset just like any other asset. So when we click on it, the inspector shows us the data and stuff that is inside the scriptable objects. So you see here we have a list of data, which is this list of data here that we created in the scriptable object. And once we open it, and let's just add one element here, and we open this, and this element has now a type and a prefab value, which is basically our item data. So, and that's it basically. This is how I create all of my databases. So we can say in our database, the sort item type has the prefab. I have the prefab over here somewhere in items sort. So we drag this in, done. And now we can add some functionality, like we can add methods to the database as well. Since this is basically just a class, we can say public item data find item, and we can basically create a method like this that searches for the data from a specific item type. And the simplest way to do that is we can, well, let's make it manually. There are some shortcuts to do this, but this is basically, we can basically just iterate through all the data. So count please, And then if data I, why is I not working? What's going on here? If data I type is equal to the item type that we passed into the method, then we want to return this data here. And if we haven't found anything, then we want to return null. I like how you explain these things. Good job. Thank you. That's awesome. All right. So now we created a method, find item, and we can pass an item type, and then it looks through all the data, and if it finds that data, basically, then we return the item data of that element in our list. So the last step we actually need is a way to access the database. And as I said to you before, we put it in the resources folder so we can do something special. But before that, let's see here, there seem to be some errors. Unexpected symbol. Why is that? What did I do wrong here? Oh, I forgot a variable here. I++ and ++I actually mean two slightly different things. But in our case, whatever you put here, it doesn't really matter. In university, I had a professor who said ++I is actually a little faster because of how references are created and how the value is counted. Basically, the difference is if you put, well, let's say I is 5, and then if you do debug log I++ and debug log ++I, the difference is this would return 6, and if we comment this out, this would return 5. So basically, the difference is, do you get the value before it's incremented, or do you get the value after it's incremented? That's the difference. And I'm not sure, I just got used to putting ++I there because I think sometimes someone told me it's just slightly faster or doesn't or allocates less memory or something like that. But I really don't know. It's just a habit that I developed. But the difference is, does the value get returned before you increment it or after you increment it? And but in this case, since we don't return the value, we don't store the value here. It's just incremented and nothing happens basically. It would be the same thing if we would put I++ here. Okay, yes, and now we want to be able to access this item database that we created from wherever, from anywhere in the code. And usually what I do for this is I create another singleton script called database, and then add database, and then add a field item in here, and well, I just showed to you. So I want to be able, this class is actually, it's not a mono behavior, it's basically just a class. It will just be a shortcut that we can access from whenever in the code. So I want to have a public static field item database. I just call it item. So in this way, I can access this from anywhere in the code by doing database.item and then .find my item or something like this. But we also need to fill this value. So I'm going to use an accessor here because I want to make sure that I don't accidentally store data in that. I only want to be able to get this. So what we can do here is we call this item database. We create a private field, item database, and then for the public field we actually create an accessor, and you could create a get and a set accessor. So basically what you can do is define functionality that happens when you write into this variable or when you read from this variable. And the most simple thing would be to do this. So whenever we read from this, so when we get, this is the get accessor basically, when we read from this, we return the item database. And when we write into this, then we set the item database to, and then you have the special constant called value, which is basically the value that we used. So let me create a method here so I can demonstrate this. Test method. So basically, if we do this, debug log item, or let's rather say it's easier to see. If we do this, debug log item, we get the variable. So this accessor, the get accessor is called. And if we do database item is equal to null, then the set is being called. And this value constant is basically whatever we put in here. So in this case, it would be null. In this case, it would be 5, even though 5 is a different data type, but you get the idea. So this is what get and set is doing. And the cool part about this is that these are actually methods. So this is the most basic way to use get and set accessors, but you can do a very complex stuff in there. And what you can also do is basically say there is no set accessor. And now we would get a compiler error here saying, if we put, this would actually be valid code, right? So we could put null into the item. But since the item only has a get accessor now and not a set accessor, we will get an error here saying you're not, this field is read only. Here, property or indexer database item cannot be assigned to, it is read only. So because you created a get accessor but not a set accessor, you won't be able to write into this variable anymore. And the cool part about this is actually what I want to do, because I want to only return this value item database and not be able to set this. But if I'm not able to set this, then this value will always be null, right? What we can do something like this. Since the get accessor is actually a method, we can do something like this. So if the item database is null, then we want to look for it, and then afterwards we return it. If it's not null, then we just don't do this, we just return what we already have. So, and now if you remember from before, we put our item database into resources/databases, and it's called item database. So what we can do now, if this is null, then we call resources.load. We want to load, and then it needs the path where it is. So it is, it's relative to the resources path, so we don't need to add the resources folder here, but we need to add our databases folder, databases and item database. You don't need to put the extension here. So basically just like this. So what we're doing whenever we access this item database, anywhere in the code, so whenever we write this item database and then, for example, find item sort, whenever we do this, this method is being, this get accessor is being called. The get accessor checks if the item database that we stored here is null. If it is, then we look for it in our resources folder, and then we return the value. And this is basically, I'm basically caching the value of the item database, because loading an asset from the resources folder actually takes a little bit of time. Not that you would notice it if you only load one asset, but it's still, the Unity has to look it up and load the data actually. So this is why I always do this kind of stuff here. So whenever I have loaded it once, I store a reference to it in my own variables, so I can just return it later on, and I don't have to worry about that I call resources load over and over and over again. So yeah, and this is basically a public class, a database class. It's not a mono behavior, and it just has this static thing. Oh, I have to make this static too, so that I can access the value, this variable from the static method. But yeah, but that's basically it. So now, wherever I am in the code, I can let's see if we can, yeah, so when anywhere in the code I can type item database dot item dot find item, and I want to find the shield, and then if there's a shield data in my database, then I get this value back and I can access all the stuff that I did that I stored in here. So for now I can access the type and the prefab. And this is actually something that I wanted to do last time, and because we let's see if I fix all the errors first. I need to, oh yes, I need to add the type here so it knows what to look for. This seems to work. So last time we basically coded that we can get this sort here. So right now if I press space, nothing is happening. And once I move up to the sort and press E to pick it up, now I picked up the sort, and my console actually tells us one sort is added, and now we can do this. And let's go to the code where this happened, because we did something here that is basically hard coded. So we access the interactable chest, which has basically the sort. This here is basically a chest with a sort visual as the closed state and no visuals as the open state. So this is why it basically disappears. And the item in the chest is a sort. And once we interact with the chest, on interact here, we add this item to the inventory of the character that interacted with the chest. So let's go into the add item method, and you can see what we did here is we hard-coded if the item type is a sort, then we want to equip the weapon. But later on we might have different swords, we might have a hammer or stuff like that should trigger this as well. And we don't want to go into this code every time and say and add a new item type here that where this code applies to as well. So what we can do now is we can go back to our, we don't need item base in the creator, let's go back to the item database. We can add a public boolean, let's say is equipable. And in our inventory we can now, instead of asking for the sort, we can find the item data of the item that we just picked up, item data, through the database that we just created, database.item.findItem, and then we have the item type up here as the parameter of the method. So we find the item type, and then we have to check if the amount is greater than 0. So if the amount that we picked up is greater than 0, just as a backup, so if we accidentally add an item with 0 amount but we don't equip it. So if the amount is greater than 0, then we look for the item in our item database. We need to check if the item data is not null, because if you remember in the find item, if we don't find it here, we return null. So it's possible that nothing is returned, so we have to check for that. But if the item data is not null, and item data equipable is set to true. So if the item data is not null, so we have an item data for this item type, and the item data says this item is equipable, then we want to access. Then we want to equip the weapon. Don't worry about it that you're late. I upload all the streams to YouTube, so you can find it. Go to letstalkgames.com and you'll find a link to the YouTube channel, and you will find all the streams there, and also links to the GitHub and stuff like that. So you can get the code, you can get the streams. You haven't missed anything. Don't worry about it. Okay, so if it's equipable, then we want to equip the weapon, and let's just keep this for now. The debug statement here. And now when we press play, you will notice that nothing will happen because we haven't set the sword item type to true yet. So when we pick up the sword, we can still not use our sword. So let's go to the item database. Item database here, we have a sword data, and we just say this is equipable. Press play again. And then now we pick up the sword, and there you go. And just the simple flag in the database basically tells our code that this is equipable, so we equip it, and then we can use it. And you deserve more views. Oh, that's nice of you. Thanks. Well, I think this is only week 5 or 6, I guess, so this takes time. I think people will find it eventually if they're interested in stuff like this. Okay. So we have the is equipable in our item database, but we also have the prefab here, the sword prefab. And if we go deeper into our code, so if we go into this equip weapon method here, this is something we did last time as well, and you can see here that this is also hard-coded. If the item type is not sword, then we don't want to do anything, and if the item type is a sword, then we want to instantiate the sword prefab that we added to our character here. So we stored a reference to the sword prefab in our character, and this is not good either. And this is why we created the database as well. So we can refactor this. We can basically remove the sword prefab here, and we go to where's the equip weapon method. We do the same thing here again. I will find the item type again. I mean, it will be redundant for the path we go now. When we go to the chest and we check if it's equipable, then we'd say equip weapon. And now I will check again if it's equipable. But we might access this method not from a chest, but from somewhere else, maybe in a story event or something. So I rather have it redundant here. So let's find this again, item data for the item that we want to equip. Database, item, find item, the item type that we just got. If the item data is null, then we don't want to do anything. And if the item data is not equipable, so it's equipable to false, then we don't want to do anything. And if we pass that, so if there is item data and if it's equipable, then we want to equip it, and then we want to have the sword prefab. But we don't have the prefab anymore. We have the prefab in the item data, right? So this way we use the item database as well to get the prefab of the item that we just equipped. So yeah, we don't have any hard-coded methods now, and it will be very easy to add new weapons, new equipable weapons later on, because we simply put them into the item database and set the flag is equipable to true. Okay, and this is a very simple form of a database. So now we have two different items that we can work with. We have the sword and we have the shield. And as I said in the beginning, we want to play animations when we get them, and we want to play two different animations. So for the sword, we want to play one hand up, hold the sword into the air animation, and for the shield, we want to hold the shield up with both hands. So this is something we can put into the item database as well. Basically, setting a flag which animation we want to play, if we want to play an animation at all. So let's do that. First of all, we want to add the animations to our character. And we already have these in our sprites. Let's go to Lunk, and they are on the, I think the attack sprite sheet has them. Yes. So we have the pickup one. You can see them here. The pickup one for the sword and the pickup 2 for the shield. We have them both here. So let's let's add them to our animator. I'm wondering if I can just drag them in here. No, I can't. That would be too easy. That would be cool, Unity. If someone is listening from Unity, just let me drag a sprite here and then I have a simple animation. But we can do the same thing by just dragging the sprite. We just create the animation. No, we just create the animation manually, I guess. Let's make this easy on us, and we just duplicate the idle up, and we call it pick up 1 for pick up with one hand. Or no, let's make it descriptive. One hand and pick up 2 hands. And those are basically, they're not really animations, they're just showing one frame. So we add those here and here. And then let's go to our character. And since we added those two to the animator and we selected our character, or rather select the visuals objects that has the animator attached to it, we can open the animation window animation or Control 6. And then we can go to our pickup one hand animation here and select the proper frame. So right now this is the idle, but we want to add the frame that we had before. So this is the pickup one hand. So we add this animation here, and we see it being previewed in the scene view. And then we go to pick up 2 hands, and in the sprite renderer we put the pickup 2 in here. So those are the 2 frames. They're very simple. And in our animator we have to connect them now somehow. So I think the simplest one is that we just simply let me think about this for a second. Yeah, I think let's go the simplest route here. We simply add 2 new parameters. Boolean flag is picking up one-handed, and the same for is picking up two-handed. And then from the any state, we just check if one of those booleans is set, and then we go there. So whatever animation is being played right now, since we're using the any state, we can switch into those or transition, that's a correct word rather, and transition into those animation. What is entry and any state? So what we are doing right now is we are creating an animator for our character, and an animator is basically you can see here, it's basically a tree with different nodes and connections between them. So each of these squares is a node in the in our state machine here. This is called a state machine. So so we have states and we have transitions between them. Each square is a node or a state, and the transitions basically can have conditions. So I can show this here so we have a transition from idle to walk, and it has a condition attached to it. Basically, if the boolean is moving is true, then move over there. And the any state, basically, well, it's what you would expect. So it doesn't really matter in what state you are. For example, we have one transition from the any state already, and this transition has the condition if the do attack trigger is being triggered, then go to the attack animation. And it doesn't really matter which animation is being played. Whenever this condition is met, we transition over to the attack animation. If you don't do that and only do this not from the any state but from the idle, for example, so we do a new transition from idle to attack, and we say this is an instant thing, and we say we put the same condition here, so do attack. Now you could only transition to the if this is removed, now you can only transition to the attack state when you're in the idle state, right? Because you added the transition from this state to this state. But since we use the any state for this, so since we want to attack from, we don't care if we're running or if if the idle animation is being played, we just want to attack whenever this condition is met. This is why we use the any state, and it doesn't have an exit time. Put the condition back in, do attack. So okay, and the same thing, we want to do the same thing with the pickup one-handed, and we want to use the any state because we don't care if we're walking or if we're in the idle animation. Whenever the code is saying play the pickup animation, we want to do that. So from the any state, we make a transition to the pickup one hand, and our condition is it doesn't have an exit time, so we can transition basically whenever we want. And our condition if is picking up one-handed is set to true. So the parameter that we just set up, if it's set to true, then we want to go to that animation. And then from this state, if the parameter is set to false again, then we want to go to the idle state. What? Speed difference between states too big? This is weird. Okay. Anyway, I think here this exit time, it has an exit time. No, it doesn't. It shouldn't have one. These values actually don't make a lot of sense for 2D frame-by-frame animation, so I just set them to 0. But for 3D animation, these basically let you define the duration of a transition, so you can smoothly transition from an idle to walk animation, for example. But since we're using frame-by-frame animation, we want to have this happen instantly. So, and yeah, the same thing, we set this up for the pickup one hand, and we want to set the same thing up for the pickup two hand. So basically any state, from any state to let's make sure the transition duration is 0, and then the condition is if picking up two-handed is set to true, and then we transition out of this again if the parameter is set to false again. Two-handed is set to false, and then we go back to idle. So this way we can basically, we have a lot of control in our code when these animations are being played and when they're not being played. And actually it gets a little crowded here right now, but I have to figure out a way to make this look a little better. I think I can group a couple of them together and stuff like that, but I'll figure that out later. So for now, basically, so let's play this, and I think I can, if I don't maximize this here, we can see when we select our thing, we can actually debug the state machine. And this is another very powerful feature of Unity's animator or state machine. Whenever you press play and then select the character, you can see the state machine and in which state it is in. So right now we are in idle, and it's basically, since idle is just one frame, this bar here goes nuts. But this bar basically tells you the progress in the animation where you're at. So you will see that when we go to walk, you can actually see. Let me walk into the wall. So yeah, so we're walking right now, but this is basically the where you are in the animation. And then usually if you're doing a 3D thing, or if your transition has has a duration, basically you would also see the transition happening on the arrow, but we have instant transitions, so the arrows don't change. And I think we can even just put debug stuff in here. So if I click this, pick up one-hand, yes, it works. So you see, if the is picking up one-handed is set to true, then the animation frame picking up with one hand is being played. So let's put this back to false. And did I screw something up? Oh yeah, I screwed something up. I forgot the exit condition here. So if this value is false again, it should go back to idle. I forgot that. But this is so cool that we can just basically set the values and see if the state machine behaves as we expected it. It's very easy to debug that this way. So we are in one-handed. So if this is set to false, then we want to transition back to idle. And I think for two-handed, I set this up correctly. Yes, I did. Okay, let's try it again. Press play. Minimize this a little bit. And so if we go to one-handed, the animation is being played. And if we set this to false again, then we're back into idle. Hello, Bob. How are you doing? Glad you're home and had a good meetup. And then let's test the two-handed stuff. So if we set this to true, then our two-handed animation is being played. And if we set this to false again, we're back to idle. Yeah, so this is the functionality that we want. I'm not quite sure what are those. Oh, because I haven't selected the right one, so the warnings were just, yeah, so there's no issue here. Okay, so basically now we have to create the code for this. We're doing this basically in the editor, but actually our game should be able to do this, to play these animations whenever we pick up a weapon or an item or whatever. Okay. Is picking up one-handed and is picking up two-handed are the variables. So in our very first episode we talked a little bit about model view control stuff, so which is basically a method, a way, or it's basically just a concept that you can use to separate your code and structure it a little bit. And it means the model, just a short recap, basically model view control means a model is all your data. So for a character, for example, the position, how much health the character has, how fast he is moving, stuff like that. This is all the actual game data. And that all belongs to the model. The control part is actually how the model, the control part, no, let's start with the view. So we have model, view, control. So the model is the data, the view is actually the representation, so how this data is being displayed. In our case, basically which sprites are being played, what animation is being played and stuff like that. And then the control part is checking for user input, or it doesn't have to be user input actually. The control class is actually anything that controls the model or changes data in the model and in the view. So it can be AI, for example, it can be a networking class that receives data and then sends it onto the model and stuff like that. So a control class is basically controlling the model and the view. What we have now is basically an animation problem. So we want to display the animation, so that belongs to the view because we're displaying something. You should make the player face south when transitioning out of the pickup animations. Yeah, we can do that in the code as well. I think it's just that happened now just because we're using the debug stuff, but we can handle that in the code. So let's go over to our view that we created. We have the movement view, and we have, so I always name them this as well. So we have the character movement model, we have the character movement view, and then we have different character controls. So we have the keyboard control. Later we can add a gamepad control, stuff like that. So this way, this is all separated out. And the benefit is that the easiest example where this is beneficial is in the control class. At the moment we have a keyboard control, but later on we can create a new class called the gamepad control. And since the control class is basically just triggering methods, so on attack press, on action press, stuff like that, the gamepad control class could trigger the same methods when a button is pressed, and then the code hasn't changed. You know that the code is still working. You're just changing the control part of it. And yeah, whenever you don't change anything in your model or your view, you know that it works as expected before. Regarding data MVC model, did you try U-frame for Unity? No, I haven't yet. I know it exists, but I haven't used it yet. I usually just use the concept to think about how I structure my code and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go back to our view, the movement view. So we want to play the animation at some point. So let's see here. Let's think how we want to do this. Actually, the view, I think it would be best to do some code in the model, because when we interact with something, the model then, because I want to, in Zelda, the character freezes for a second when you pick something up, and so you have, I don't know, some duration of time where the character is frozen, and then once you start walking again, you can just continue moving along, stuff like that. So let's put something like this in the model. In our movement model, we actually already have this equip weapon stuff. So whenever we equip a weapon, is that a good idea? Yeah, I think so. Then we can trigger the stuff that we equipped something. So I think we have is frozen here. Yes, we have we can freeze our character. When we equip something, we freeze the character. But let's check first which animation we actually want to play. Oh no, let's do it for the sword, and then we make it generic later on. So for the sword, we freeze the character, and also we want to make sure that the pickup animation is being played. So bool, a public bool is picking up object. And for now, this is we just add a new boolean for this. Or actually, let's not make a boolean. Let's make an item type for this. Item type picking up object, and this is basically none. So we can so we set this to frozen. Picking up object, we set this to the item type that we received, and then we change this to not a boolean that we're picking up a weapon, but we actually want to get the type back, which weapon we're picking up. So public get item get picking up object. I'm not sure. Get item that is being picked up. It's not good. Get, I don't know. I just use get item that is being picked up. It's not a good method. I don't know. I have to think up. Do you have a better idea for this? I'm not sure. So picking up object, so we return this. And this way we can look up in the view, are we picking up an object? And if yes, let's see which object, and then play the appropriate animation for that. It's not just the character that stops in Zelda, the whole game set freezes while the pickup sound plays. That is true. And we had this before, this we actually have this functionality for when we interact with a sign. Because the animes stop as well and stuff like that. So whenever we interact with a sign, the game is frozen, and then when we interact again we can continue. So let's see what we did there, and then just replicate that, or see if we can make it generic and work for the pickup as well. Let's go to the sign. So whenever we do this, whenever we set the frozen to true, and then we freeze the time 1 frame afterwards, so the animator can pick it. Okay. I'm not sure if I like this too much, but for now it works. But let's put this into the movement script here. So what we're doing when we interact with the sign is this. So we check if the dialog box is visible. If it's visible, then we basically know that we already interacted with it and we see the text. Then we set the timescale back to 1 and we unfreeze the character. And if the dialog box is not visible, then we want to freeze the character, basically ignoring all the inputs. And then 1 frame later, we want to freeze the time. And we basically do it 1 frame later because sometimes the animation has to go back to idle animation, stuff like that. Because if you freeze the time immediately, the character can be in the middle of its movement animation, and then the game would freeze and the character would just float there. No, you can't play animations, but well, you can advance animations with your own scripts. You can basically say this animation should be at this and this time now, but Unity is not advancing the animation, and this is why we wait 1 frame with this coroutine here, and then set the timescale to 0, so we can return to our idle animation and then freeze the game. But since we want to do the same thing now when we pick up a weapon, let's put this coroutine not into this interactable sign here. Let's put this coroutine into the set frozen method here. And then we can add a boolean if we want to freeze the time as well. So we put this here, and then so set frozen gets a new parameter, bool freeze, or just call it effect game time. And then if effect game time is true, if is frozen is true, if it's frozen is true, then we want to use this start this coroutine in 1 frame. And if we unfreeze the character, then we also unfreeze the timescale. So set the timescale back to 1 basically. And let's go back to the interactable sign. We remove the freeze time routine and we don't need timescale. We basically now just add this boolean that this method affects the game time as well. I'd add a state manager that controls all logic, so you could just reroute all the logic that normally controls the game. Yes, it's true, and this is why I hesitated a second ago, because I actually don't like playing with the timescale from Unity, because sometimes you want, for example, let's say we add a pause menu for the game, and you open up the pause menu, so the game should be paused. But inside the pause menu, you actually want to animate something. You want to have a, I don't know, like let's say Navi is flowing, or there's this sleeping character that is snoring and stuff like that. So you actually don't want to. Sometimes you actually want to pause the game, but not set the timescale to 0. And what I do for this usually is I create a global objects with different states in there, and there would be is game frozen or something, a boolean for that, and then I need to make sure that I access that whenever. The downside to this is that I can forget to access this. So for example, I can forget in an enemy to access this frozen boolean, so the enemy would still move when the game is frozen. But then again, you can have different frozen stuff in there as well. So you can have a game state that only the character is frozen or the enemies are frozen and stuff like that. So you have more control, but you can also make more mistakes. So it's always a trade-off. For now, we stick to the time scale because it works, but I'm not very happy with it. We change it later, I guess. Okay, so now I can just use the set frozen here. So instead of setting is frozen to true manually, we access the method set frozen to true, and we also want to affect the game time. And then we're setting up the picking up object. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So in our view, we now check two different things. First, is this if this picking object is something that is not zero, not none, so the item type can also be none, and it's none in the beginning. And if the character is frozen, then we want to play the animation. So let's get item that is being picked up. Let's go to the view, and the view is able to has a reference to the model already. So we can, in our update, create a new update method here. Update picking up animation. So we check if the character is frozen. Do we have that? No, we haven't. Don't have it is frozen yet. Okay. So let's add this method. Public bool is frozen, and we just return the value. So if the character is frozen, if the character is not frozen, then we want to return. We don't want to play the animation. Oh, no. Wait. Actually, we don't want to return. We want to set those values all the time. So basically, we're passing on a value to the animator, and we want to basically modify these parameters here. Is picking up one-handed and is picking up two-handed. So is picking up one-handed. Let's make this step by step very clear. So is picking up one-handed is, by default, it's always false. And we check in the model. If the character is frozen, then we might be able to change this. If the character is not frozen, then this will remain false. And then if in the movement model get item that is being picked up, if the item is being picked is not none, then we want to pick up one-handed. Set this to true. There will be more. We need more stuff here, but for now, let's see if this works. So every frame we check if the character is frozen. If the character is frozen and an item is being picked up, then we want to play this animation. So what I expect to happen, if there would be no errors here. Oh, set float. This is actually, it has to be set boolean, of course. So I would expect, what I would expect to happen now is that I can pick up the weapon, the animation is being played, but the weapon will not be visible, and then we can't do anything anymore. So let's see. Animation is being played, I cannot walk, and the sword is invisible. Alright, so this works. So now we need a way to show the weapon, and we actually already have a way to do that through animation. So let's go to the main character visuals. Let's open up the animation window, and we did that last time. So in our attack animation, you can see here we have two methods: on attack started and on attack finished. And those methods actually show and hide the sword. But I think I'm going to add a new weapon, a new method now: show weapon and hide weapon. And later on we can do show shield and hide shield as well. Because showing, I noticed in the attack right, for example, the weapon has to be hidden before the animation finishes, because Jesse set the animation up in a way, let me zoom in so you can see it properly. So you can see here in the attack right animation, the sword is being displayed here through the on attack started method, and then we go, and it's visible through here, and then it's basically just an animation that returns back to idle. There's one frame there, a transition frame between there, and the sword should already be invisible. So I put the on attack finished event here. But the attack hasn't really finished. The attack has finished here. So what this does right now is that we can actually attack to the right. We can attack faster when we're looking to the right than we can look to the left, just because we want to hide the sword earlier. So let's fix that first. Let's actually not use on attack started to show the sword, but create a new method for that. So we have our on attack started, and we have our on attack finished, and we pass that onto the model and the view, which is fine. We still want to do that, but we don't want to show and hide the sword in the view in those methods anymore. I want to create a new method for that. So we call this public void show weapon and public void hide weapon, and those are only being passed onto the view because it only has to do with the visuals. So we create new methods here, so the view actually doesn't do anything when attack. We can still have this event, but for now it's empty. So show weapon will call the method set weapon active to true, and hide weapon will set active weapon to false. And then I pass these on. So we're now in the animation listener class here, and I can show you in a second what this does. So we pass those onto the view, and the animation listener is a component that we added to the same game object that has the animator class. And all methods that are public in basically any class that is any component that is attached to the animator, those public methods will be exposed to your animation here. So those methods that we just created will now be available in the here in the drop-down menu, so you can get an animation event here. So now I'm curious, can we have two animation events at the same time? It looks like it. So we want to show the weapon. Let's see. Show weapon on attack started. Okay. And what if I do is the third one? Okay, so I can have as many events here as I want, which is good. So on attack started, we call on attack started, and we also call show weapon, and then we call hide weapon as well. This is, yeah, so in attack left, those two events fall at the same frames, but in attack right, they don't. So show weapon goes here, the on attack finished goes back to the last frame, and then we hide the weapon one frame before the last one. Hide weapon. And let's go to attack down. We have the same problem here. Show weapon, first frame, hide weapon one frame earlier. And then that's the last one for up. Show weapon, put this to the end, and hide weapon. But now, what we just did is we have now two new methods in here where we can show and hide weapon in any animation actually. So we can go to our pick up one hand animation and say show weapon. And then in our idle animation, we basically make sure that the weapon is invisible by calling hide weapon on all the on all idle animations. This is just a quick way to do this. And Unity 5, actually we have a method, a way to check when we enter a state and when we exit a state from the animator. So we could also use that to have the logic of showing and hiding the sword for the pickup animation in that, but we do that later. There's a question here. What about physics in this case? Doesn't the physics engine continues to calculate speed ADC when timescale is not 0? It does, but we are not. For now, we are actually we're calculating the velocity ourselves. So let me show this to you. Let's go to the movement model, and you can see that we're actually calculating the velocity ourselves in our game. So we're setting the velocity directly. We're not adding any forces to the character. We're setting the velocity, and this is why we can if we do a global state which said the character is frozen, we would check for the state here as well and then set the velocity to 0. If you want to do it in such a way that the animation, the physics get paused as well, what would you do in that case? I actually don't know. I'm actually not quite sure. I think this would get more complex if you go with physics, yeah. I mean, yeah, as is being said in the chat, normally you would want to reroute the updates for the physics engine and stop accumulating delta time. Yeah, so once you're into that rabbit hole of being able to set your time scale differently in different spaces, you have to be very careful to set this up properly. But for now, I don't quite know what the implications of that are for physics. Okay, but since we are setting the velocity ourselves, we are actually good on that. So let's see if the show weapon works like we want it to for our pickup animation. So we're picking the sword up, and it's being shown, which is good, but it's not being shown at the right space. And this is because we haven't set up the pickup animation properly yet. So let's go back here. Let's open up our animation timeline again and go to our pickup event. Pick up one hand animation, and then if you remember, so we have a child to our visuals object, which is basically the weapon parent, which is just an empty game object. And whenever we add a weapon, we actually use this weapon parent to see where the position is. This is how we animated the sword position, stuff like that. So for this frame, we actually still need to add the property of our weapon parent and make sure that the position is being animated as well. We don't need the second frame here. Make sure that the position of this is being animated properly, so it's set up to, I think roughly here should be fine. So let's see if this works better now. Let's pick up the sword, and there you go. And we're picking up the sword. And the only thing that is left to do for now is that we are able to walk back again. And I think the simplest way to do that is, let me check the control of that direction, 0, and then we set the direction, and we send the direction to the movement model. So what we can do is, if this is set to true, so we just make it like so, for example. So if the character is frozen and the direction that we get is not 0, so if the character is frozen and we want to move somewhere, and too many ands here, but still, and the get item that is being picked up is not 0, so basically this is not so nice. We don't need this frozen part here. So if the direction is not 0 and we're picking up a weapon, then we want to unfreeze our character and say that and basically reset the pickup weapon, so we can move again. So basically the game is frozen until we press another movement button, which is good enough for now. So set this back to 0, to none, and also unfreeze the character, set frozen to false, and we want to affect game time as well. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's pick up the weapon. Everything is frozen, and once we move, this does not work. Why is that? Inventory model. Keyboard control. Let's see here if we get the direction properly. Wait, oh no, I have if the get item that is being picked up is not none, not a sort. So if we're picking up an item and if the direction is not 0, then we want to return. There was just a typo there. See if that fixed the issue here. Picking up, moving again. There you go. But that's not good. Why aren't we attacking properly? Sword is not being shown. Let's see. So the sword is attached. The show sword is not being called properly. So aren't we not able to have different? What is for attack left? I will remove this to the show weapon to the second frame. But this can't be it. So I attack left. Okay, so attack left. Now it works, and here it doesn't. So we can't show use two at the same time. That would be bad. That can't be right. Can it? But it's being hidden again. No, in facing left animation side you hit the sword maybe? No, it's because this happens for all directions. The issue that I have is that hiding the sword works. So if I delete hide weapon and I put show weapon in the second frame, you could... Oh, the idle hides the weapon again. I see. Okay. So I guess two can't do the same thing. I'll figure that out. I have to research that a little bit. So what I do for now is this. I just call the show weapon I automatically call show weapon on started and call the hide weapon on finished. So this is being done all the time. So once this is called, but I also have the show weapon and hide weapon to it in addition to control it somewhere else. It looks like a race condition pretty much. Yeah, I'll figure that out offline and then fix it and show it to you later. This is not an interesting problem to debug on stream, I guess. So on attack started and on attack finished, I just make sure that there is there's just one for each one, and then we can also hide it earlier if we want to. Okay, press play again. So we pick up the sword is being shown in our animation state, and then we move on, and yes, and this works again. Cool. So one other thing that that we still need to fix is you can see here that sometimes the sword is in front of the character even though it has to be in the back, and sometimes it has to be in the front. And I want to use animation events for that too, because I mean, for the down animation, the sword is always above the character, but sometimes here in the back in the up animation, sometimes it has to be behind the character, sometimes it has to be in front. Actually, not really for the sword, but I know that for the shield later we have the problem that, or here for the right animation we have that problem as well. I'm not sure if you can see it on stream because it's very fast, but in the beginning the sword has to be above the character because it's above the in front of the torso here, and then the last frame the sword should actually be behind the character because it's blocked by the head. So we need a way to change the sorting order of the items mid-state somewhere. And I want to use the animation events for that too. Or actually, do we have to? So, wait, let's check the visuals here. So our character is on the character's sorting layer, and what we can do is that we set the order in the layer of the character. Let's put the character to 100, so it's in the layer characters but on the order 100, and then we can use everything that is above 100 is above the character, and everything below 100 is behind the character, and we basically just switch the order of the weapon depending on where it's supposed to be. But since we had the issue before that we cannot use two animation events at the same frame, this is also something. Yeah, I have to check that. I'm really curious why we cannot use more than one animation event at one frame. I'm not quite sure that this can be right really. So I'm going to check that, and then we do this all this stuff next time when I figure that out. But what we can do today is, we only have 10 minutes left till I want to finish the stream. So what we also can do for now is, so we have the sword, And then down here we have a chest that we can get to, and then once we interact with it, a shield gets added. And I want to have the stance for the shield as well, and that we can see the shield. So let's do that. In order to debug this more easily, I put the character in here, so I'm just basically, I am near the shield all the time. And so first of all, we need to go to our item database and add the shield item here. Shield, and it needs a prefab, so let's create a shield prefab. Remove all the stuff for the weapon, and the visuals basically have the shield. Okay, and in our item database again, we also want to set this shield to equipable. First of all, we need to set the proper prefab, and then the shield is equipable as well. So right now, this actually should also work already. So yeah, the shield is equipable, so it plays the animation. But we want to play a different animation here. So this is something we can put in the item database as well. Let's go back to our item database script. Where is it? Item database. And we want to either play the one-handed animation, the two-handed animation, or no animation at all. So these are three different states. So let's put in create an enum for that. Pick up animation none, one-handed or two-handed. It's equipable, and then basically we use this enum as a new field in our item data. So we can set the in our item database we can set these values once it's compiled. We have new fields here, so we can set the sword animation to one-handed, and we can set the shield animation to two-handed. And I think we need to set up one more thing before that. We need to add the show. So for the pick up one hand animation, we have the show weapon already. So for the pick up two hands, we need the show weapon as well. Show weapon, and also, as you remember, we need to set the position of the weapon prefab, weapon parent rather. So we want to animate the position, and this is wrong. We want to animate the position of this and set this to above the head somewhere. I'll put this somewhere here. Okay. And now in our view we have the item data. Let's go back to the view. So we have the is picking up one-handed, and for now we're basically just checking if there is an item being picked up, and then we pick it up one-handed, and we need more elaborate code here. So again, we find the we get the item data, database item, find item for the item that is being picked up. So item type, pickup item. So let's put this in a variable. So if the pickup item is not none, then we want to find the item data of that pickup item. And then we basically just make a switch of that stage. So switch animation. If the animation is set to one-handed, then we want to set the one-handed boolean to true. And if the animation is set to two-handed, then we want to create a new two-handed boolean that we then set to true. Two-handed to true. Break this. And then make sure to pass the two-handed on to the animator as well. And that should be it. So now we're checking for the value in the database and see if we want to play an animation at all and which one of the two we want to play. So let's see if that worked. Press play. Once we get the item, and there's the two-handed. Perfect. It's a little offset, we need to fix that, but it's fine for now. And let's move us out of the things here again, so we can pick up the sword first and see if both animations work. So there you go. The one-hand animation is being played here. And then okay, there's still a bug there. I mean, basically what we're doing right now is we equipping the item, and then once we equip an item, we create that item in the weapon prefab, but we actually want to have two different parents, the weapon parent and then the shield parent. So yeah, so we need some more parents here and stuff like that. But I think since we're 2 minutes before the end of the show, I think we're going to move that to the next show. And there's some movement of the items as well, but I actually like that. So yeah, so today we created an item database and made sure that we can access that item database from wherever. And then we refactored some of our hard-coded stuff so it makes use of that item database. Now you can see now both the sword and the shield are attached here. So we need to fix that later, because we only have one hand for now, one hand parent. But I think this is good progress, and we have some new stuff in here, some flowers, some grass. I will use them more later, so it's the map looks a little nicer, and we have the fence stuff here as well. So yeah, I think this actually would be a good place to stop for today, I guess. So let me see, there's one more thing. Adding an extension method for item type called getData would make for much nicer code. That's true. Basically what you're saying is this find item is always kind of cumbersome. Yeah, we can do that. But then we need to check for null. I mean, we need to check for null anyway. Yeah, you're right. We can do that. I think we can do that next time. Extension is also creating extension methods is also nice. Something nice to learn. So yeah, let's do that next time. So we can make our code a little bit nicer. All right. So let's stop here for now. Thank you very much for watching this on this fine Saturday. And next time, I'm actually not quite sure what we do next time. We have a couple of different options. Let me open up the sprites here, so we can. I think that this might be a cool. Something cool to do next time. We have actually this bat here. So we can add an enemy to the game, and we also have some animations when the character is hit, and we have some UI stuff with hearts. So yeah, let's add an enemy next time, and the ability to have health and get hits and hit the enemy and destroy the enemy and stuff like that. I think this is good for next time. So I hope to see you again next Saturday. It will be on the same time at 6 p.m. Central European Time, at noon at Eastern Time, and at 9 a.m. Western Time. And until then, I guess, code more games.